Hey guys, it's Dave and Dor with Tactical Hyve. In today's video, we're going to be going over a rifle setup for night operations. Nods, lasers, you get the gist. Up next. Hey, today's video is brought to us by CCW Safe. If you find yourself in a serious self-defense encounter, good luck, but afterwards you can count on that second fight coming. And CCW Safe has that down to a science. All right, they will handpick your legal team, cover costs, and send out an independent investigator to work on your behalf if need be. So go ahead and check them out in the description below.
Let's also show out some, let's show some love to our other partners we have. Let's give some love to Dry Fire Mag and Better Holsters. So if you're in the market for a Dry Fire Mag or Better Holsters, check them out as well.
Alrighty, Dave, baby. Night vision capability, the bells and whistles that come with it. It's becoming far more prevalent, far more common all over the world. And to include here in the good old US of A.
For sure.
So, we wanted to make a video, kind of talk a little bit about how we set things up, a little bit of the how and the why, tips and tricks, because, unless you were in a skill set, job set that required you to learn this stuff, it can be a little bit bewildering. And if you're not getting paid and having all this stuff provided to you, the cost of it all, which is something I'm trying to get used to, it is quite substantial. So, there's just a little bit of how to keep this stuff up and running, how to keep it protected as best you can, given, what you're going to be doing with it. And, Dave and I, in regards to, laser setup, talking throughout our careers, we were pretty much a big fan of running our lasers on top. Mm-hmm. It kind of gives you the best of both worlds in regards to, banging the gun into things, obviously. But, you can't run them off to the side. Generally, if I was going to run it off to the side because I had to, just due to rail space on the platform, etc., I would definitely put it in place of where I would run my flashlight, which would be on the left side because I'm a right-handed shooter. And that just keeps me from banging the laser into door jams and getting in and out of vehicles, conducting clearance, obviously going through thresholds, climbing over walls, stuff like that. I like to have this thing between, as much as possible, keep it between me and the earth, the world around me. But having it up on top, I think was, kind of good enough.
Yeah, I tried it on the side a couple of different times. Wasn't a fan of it. Mm-hmm. I tended to run mine if I had to run on the side. Mm-hmm. I'd run the other side only because I run my sling so far forward. Mm-hmm. I'd have sling, options. I'd have sling issues. You wouldn't even notice until you're using it. You're like, oh, wow, that doesn't work.
Yeah, and that's a great point. Depending on how you set up your sling, that is going to come into play. I'm always, unless I'm using a long rifle, which I would put it on top anyway, but I run my sling setups generally farther to the rear because I go from modified 2-point to 1-point, but definitely how you run your sling and how, the weapon feels more natural to you, because honestly, you're carrying it because you need to be able to use it effectively and very, very quickly. That's also going to come into play. You don't always have your nods on, so having a working flashlight on every weapon system, weapon mounted as it's known, definitely a good idea. And so I tend to run, for the same reasons I spoke to, lights. This is a period correct 2000s gun. So I've got this old honking light on here just for nostalgia. But all my lights generally run along the left side, but not always. But again, if I'm running a full length barrel or on an SBR, I generally have a foregrip for up close encounters. But if I were to take this foregrip up, which I do on some of my platforms, then I may get creative with where I put my light, because it needs to be easy to get to, but not too easy to get to. Because if your light or your actuator, your pressure pad, if you're using one, like on this early 90s build, is naturally where I keep my hand, then I could have light ADs. And if you haven't been out in terrain, you haven't been out working in the world, dealing with its shenanigans, it's not always going to be, you're not always going to be like focused in on what you're doing in regards to shooting. And if on the flat range where shooting is the emphasis, that's not as big of a deal. But when you take this out into the world, that's where light ADs are going to happen. And light ADs are a super big no-no.
Big deal.
You could get beat up at my last job for having a light AD one too many times or at the wrong time. Like, it is that big of a deal. Lights attract bullets. And for that same reason, as our careers progressed, IR light became the new white light.
Yep.
And so you had to be very careful where you had your ability to turn on that IR illuminator. So again, more thought and more caution was put into where those pressure pads were located. And so you just, if you're starting out or you want to prepare for this, or, you want to maybe make sure this isn't going to happen to you, go ahead and just put your hands on your weapon system, your support hand on your forend, and wherever your hand naturally lies, wherever it feels most comfortable for you to shoot and to be at patrol ready, just make sure that's not where your pressure pad is. That might be counterintuitive to, the range bro, tacti-cool chads that, just want to dress up and train fully dressed up. And I'm not knocking it. That's cool. It's a hobby. But if you intend on being out in the world for the reasons we kind of already spoke to, you want to have to reach for that pressure pad, and that will keep the ADs down. Because I'm going to tell you, like, again, Dave, like, light attracts bullets very quickly.
It's bad.
And IR light, given how common nods are, is going to potentially attract those bullets just as fast as a white light. So please, just take that on board. You can do whatever you want. You don't work for me. But getting shot at sucks.
This setup right here, you can see how far forward I moved that pad on that laser. It's way forward. And back here, that unity switch I have for my light. So I'm normally shooting on the range. I'm right here with it. So if I want to hit my light, I have to come back to make a conscious decision in making. That light's shielded. That button's shielded. Doesn't mean you can't hit it. But the only thing is my laser, again, is a constant decision to come forward. Like Dora was saying, it's not where my hand naturally rests. That's where my hand's sitting when I'm shooting normally.
And it is slower to get to than if it's naturally resting underneath your thumb or whatever. And if absolute speed and precision is your goal because you are in a safe and sane environment and you are using these as sporting goods or for a hobby, like, that's totally fine and okay. I'm not here to tell you how to live your life. But the plunger, which that switch is basically, is, back here on the back of the this one, you've got the Surefire Scout as well as this. They've got these plungers in the back. These are, a little bit more difficult to get to, and that's by design. The likelihood of an AD goes down significantly. I can't remember the last time I had one, though I have had them. But, just being able to reach based on where my hand naturally lies, but that I can just reach back and turn this on. I'm not gainfully employed using this equipment currently, so I'm not that worried about it on this. Obviously, I wouldn't be worried about what kind of grip I had or not buttstock I had. It's just still, I like to keep to these principles because you train how you fight. And, people have lost their lives because of these little mishaps. That's something you definitely want to take into account. Next up, guys, we have lanyards. Hard wiring, lanyarding, TPI. TPI, guys, generally it means two-person integrity, but when it comes to this stuff, it's two-point integrity. So you have your primary mounting system. So some of them are the screw down, and then some of them are the locking quick release, but it's not enough. All right. Anything that can fail will. So having that two-point integrity where you use baling wire or some other method of attachment, Dave's got a great example right here, and that will keep you from losing what falls off. Because in the heat of the moment, in the dark, whatever, it's gone. And yeah, that's super expensive, but you got to live long enough for it to be super expensive. So, keeping it with you is good, and it'll let you know that you lost it. And if you have, the quick disconnect, you should probably be able to return it to zero with the quick disconnect, or at least close enough.
Yeah. And
that's, whatever you can get out of that is, good luck. But definitely want to make sure that you are securing these by a secondary means. If you intend to dodge, dip, dive, duck, and all that stuff that, you do in the movies.
Yeah.
Because stuff falls off, guys. We've both seen it. We both had examples of that, and maybe not only with our weapon systems, but with the guys we worked with. It's just kind of inevitable.
The things you have to consider too is if you're using a riser rail like this is a separate rail. I've seen this. This is why I'm telling you, right? I know a thing or two because I've seen a thing or two. I've seen guys secure the riser secured, but the optic wasn't, or the laser was, whatever was attached to it, and it comes off, and vice versa. Like this one here, you can see this laser here. These bolts underneath this locking system sometimes come loose. So if you just lock down your mounting system and not your laser or your optic, you could have an issue. It's definitely a PCI, a pre-combat inspection check when you get back and you're feeding your guns that for your post-combat inspection check that you're making sure all your attachments are secured and ready to go.
Yeah, and the better job you do on your post, easier your pre-check will be, or vice versa. But just kind of stay ahead of it. Remember to do it because inevitably all this stuff is going to rattle off.
Yeah, if you use it hard enough.
Riser height, the rise of risers. Like we spoke to earlier, as we started to see more SOP mod coming back at us, that's what kind of caused us to not just have that free will with our IR lights. Because back in the good old days, the 2000s, the Bush era, like you literally could just do whatever you wanted with your lasers. You could play tag. You could like chase each other's lasers around if you weren't a safe and sane enough place to do so. Like you literally, it didn't matter. Nobody cared. Yeah, completely unconstrained. But I would say towards the end of the 2000s and definitely the farther we got into the 2010s, that became less and less of a thing. Like the opposition started catching up. SOP mods started being more widely spread. You could buy the stuff on the internet. Yeah, some countries had embargoes and all kinds of restraints. Well, guess what? Bitcoin. Yeah, that's a whole other story for another day. Yeah. But they found ways around it and they started buying a lot of this stuff. And so that's what kind of brought risers back. We take it back in time, 30 years ago. This is kind of a representation of that. You had your carry handle and you had your optic on top. So this thing's already plenty high, but that went away. We wanted to have that co-witness or, our aiming capability farther down in line with the iron sights. Okay. But things started to pop back up. But on night vision, using this over 30-year-old representation model, you can passively aim, and with an IR cover that I took off for some reason, you can get a pretty good view of what's downrange. Then again, this is an old light, doesn't have the bazillions of lumens like we have now, but you don't have to buy an old light. You can buy just a modern version that probably costs less.
And the modern versions now with those LED heads, those LED heads are incredible. Yeah.
And then you can buy them with the ability to switch them back and forth from white even to red in IR and then off, which will prevent light ADs, which is a great function. We had those lights for quite a while at my last job. And then, or you can just go with the filter caps. These are all options. Having protective covers on your red dot, if you're running and gunning and you're flipping rolling, perfectly rolling, like a boss, armored vehicles, before you get to 30 seconds out, 1 minute out, having the ability to protect your lenses is a great idea, especially if you're paying for this stuff. But anytime, your life or someone whose life is worth it is, hanging in the balance, you don't want to have, a catastrophic failure because the supply guys or Amazon in our case nowadays isn't going to be there to give you that quick swap out. Switching back to to replace the Car 15, the M4 as we know it with the rail top, we went down to that co-witness, we dropped the optics down to that co-witness, and co-witnessing is great. And anytime you have sighted in iron sights, you can swap out red dots so that you can continually to passively aim, because passively aiming on iron sights is not the deal. But being able to Z these in co-witness on these types of sights comes in handy. And it's something that I highly recommend if you don't want to run irons on your gun all the time. Just have them in your rifle bag for that reason. You're that much closer to it. Because being able to passively aim with a little bit of practice on night vision works, and it works very well. And it's just as hard to tell where you are on nods as it would have been in the naked eye, because you're not emitting any signature. And being able to go back and forth when appropriate at a moment's notice is super important. And it's getting more and more important the farther into modern time we get.
The big thing that'll give you away nowadays when you're passively aiming is muzzle flash. Like
yes.
these two guns right here are both set for suppressors.
Yes.
But they're both basically comps, and they throw, if you've ever shot one at night, fireballs left and right. So if you have a setup like this for your home defense piece and you think you're going to touch 2 rounds off down the hallway, and a bad guy coming in your door to still be able to see or hear, you got another thing coming.
Mm-hmm.
It's not,
and then
not going to happen.
These two have pinned elongated A2 style flash hiders because I'm a nerd and I don't want to be dangerous or scary. And having a teeny bit more flash hider accomplishes that, because I don't want to scare anybody. But it also helps with the flash a little bit more, which is something I'm more than okay with, because the last thing I want to do is get shot because somebody saw my muzzle flash.
Mm-hmm.
And most 5.56, we're basically living in a 5.56 world here. Most of that ammunition is designed to burn for 20 inches to achieve that 3,200, give or take, feet per second. And the shorter you go on that barrel, yes, you're going to lose velocity, which doesn't matter right now, but it is going to create a larger flash. And, this is an 11.5. It has a Surefire Warden on it. It's got the SOCOM flash hider on it, again, so you can throw a can on it. But even the Warden does help a little bit, but not too much. This one, even with the 11.5 on these, compared to these 16s, is going to have less of a signature. So just little tips and tricks like that can help. But if this had been a comp underneath here instead of the flash hider, I would be emitting more flash. And again, I'm teaching, I'm old, I'm done, I'm not that worried about it. But having suppressors, having access to suppressors to keep yourself safe at night is a must. A lot of carbon on this thing. All right. Little story time. The first time I was ever in a close contact where everybody in my party was fully suppressed, I noticed that the enemy had a hard time figuring out how far away we were. And we were not very far away. We were within hand grenade range, but it was very dark and they weren't on comms, and it was kind of a surprise situation. So I don't think they were really ready for us. It was more of a bump into each other thing. And I noticed that had they known how close we were, I don't think they would have been moving around as much.
Yeah.
It's not something I'd ever seen before. And so again, it comes back to that reducing your signature, and the suppressors are awesome for that. So, if you have the ability to achieve that capability for night operations, I highly suggest it. Going back to red dots, a lot of higher end red dots have night vision capability dots. And if you want to use those, by all means, definitely having that capability when appropriate is a good thing to have. But I never used it on any of my optics professionally. I always just used a very low power red because I did not want to, for whatever reason, lose my night vision capability or not need my night vision capability all of a sudden because it got bright all of a sudden and not be able to instantaneously continue to engage.
Yeah. I never wanted to be able to go into a house and also need to use a white light and I have no dot.
Yeah, because it just, for whatever reason, electricity, fire, what have you, has the ability to make things bright all of a sudden. And I know most guys were the same way.
Yeah.
You just didn't want to be solely dependent on the nod.
And it works great. That very first setting. Very first setting's still pretty bright when it's pitch black.
And just being able to pop those nods up, real quick and take a quick shot, or two, just to get you out of trouble. Definitely something that I recommend.
I'll tell you one big thing, guys, that has, in terms of how lasers have progressed, right? So like the very first lasers I ever had was a PEC 4 Charlie, and it was just a laser.
Not all lasers have that dual visible IR capability, but if you are getting into this game, I'm telling you, being able to sight in your IR laser, your IR aiming capability in the daytime without your nods on is a huge advantage, and we didn't always have.
Yeah, and it makes it even easier now. If this rifle's already zeroed, I zero this rifle in the daytime, it's so easy for me to co-witness that laser in the daytime, and now I know my laser is zeroed. Granted, it's zeroed for whatever that gun's set up to, and there's other ways to do it. We'll do a different video on that specifically, but it makes it so much easier. I can remember the days of old having to get in the hallway and turn the lights off black, and have one guy down there with a bore light. So you can bore light laser your lasers. It was,
yeah, we would use the Hyve.
Yeah. Horrible. Yeah.
All right, guys, this is just a video on, just kind of the tips and tricks, things that, you learn along the way. I personally received little to no formal instruction on soft mod. I'm old enough to have gone through with iron sights and flares and white lights when I was going through buds and SQT. There was a little bit of soft mod and SQT, but it really wasn't until you got to the team. And they just handed you this Hitman weapons case full of stuff. And I just kind of learned along the way. So, if you're paying for your own thing and you don't have that level of instruction or example to follow, just making sure that you keep everything correct and in the right spot is a big help.
Hey guys, so this equipment and this layout, what we're showing you, the progression of it is seriously about, training at night and how to set it up. But the thing that you need to really press forward with is if you have it, if you spend the money and the time and the effort to get it, then go train with it, right? And if you don't know how to train with it, seek training. Seek it out and seek people out who have that knowledge and just be a sponge and learn how to use it and put it really through the paces. Try as much as you can to get off the square range. Use it for a square range for sure, right? But really put it through its paces where it works the best. That's where you're really going to find out where its strengths and weaknesses are, is you getting it out and using it. So,
alrighty, thanks for being here. Hope some of this helps. This is just based on our experiences and what we observed, others experiencing. And we'll catch you next time. This is Dor and Dave, Tactical Hyve.
Thanks, out.